So hello, ladies and gentlemen, friends and neighbors, brothers and sisters. We're going to be reading here from Hamlet. We've come inside from the cold, and now it's much cozier and warmer and brightly lit. So we're going to be reading from Hamlet. This is Act 1, Scene 3. Enter Laertes and Ophelia, his sister. Laertes begins. My necessaries are embarked. Farewell, and sister, as the winds give benefit and convey his assistant, do not sleep, but let me hear from you. Ophelia responds, Do you doubt that? For Hamlet, in the trifling of his favour, hold it a fashion and toy in blood, a violet in the youth of primy nature, forward, not permanent, sweet, not lasting, the perfume and suppliance of a minute, no more. No more, but so. Think it no more. For nature, crescent, does not grow alone in thews and bulk, but as this temple waxes, the inward service of the mind and soul grows wide withal. Perhaps he loves you now, and now no soil nor cattle doth besmirch the virtue of his will. But you must fear his greatness weighed. His will is not his own, for he himself is subject to his birth. He may not, as unvalued persons do, carve for himself, for on his choice depends the safety and the health of the whole state, and therefore must his choice be circumscribed under the voice and yielding of that body whereof he is the head. Then, if he says he loves you, it fits your wisdom so far to believe it as he in his particular act and place may give his saying deed, which is no further than the main voice of Denmark goes withal. Then weigh what loss your honour may sustain, if with too credent an ear you list his songs, or lose your heart, or your chaste treasure open to his unmastered importunity. Fear it, Ophelia. Fear it, my dear sister, and keep you in the rear of your affection out of the shot and danger of desire. The chariest maid is prodigal enough if she unmask your beauty to the moon. Virtue itself scapes not calumnious strokes. The canker galls the infants of the spring too oft before their buttons be disclosed, and in the morn and liquid dew of youth contagious blasphements are most imminent. Be wary then. Best safety lies in fear. Youth to itself rebels, though none else near. Ophelia responds, I shall the effect of this good lesson keep as watchman to my heart. But, good my brother, do not, as some ungracious pastors, do show me the steep and thorny way to heaven, whiles, like a puffed and reckless libertine himself, the primrose path of dalliance treads, and recks not his own reed. Oh, fear me not. Enter Polonius. I stay too long. But here my father comes. A double blessing is a double grace. Occasion smiles upon a second leave. Polonius says, Yet here, there it is. Aboard, for shame. The wind sits in the shoulder of your sail, and you are stayed for. There, my blessing with you. And these few precepts in thy memory, look thou care to. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast, and their adoption tried, grapple them under thy soul with hoops of steel. But do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched, unfledged courage. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear it, that the opposed may beware of thee. Give every man thy ear, and few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Costly thy habit, as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy. Rich, but not gaudy. For the apparel oft proclaim the man, and they in France of the best rank and station are of a most select and generous, chief in that. Neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend, and borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Farewell. My blessing seasons in thee. Most humbly do I take my leave, my lord. The time invests you. Go, your servants tend. Farewell, Ophelia, and remember well what I have said to you. 'Tis in my memory locked, and you yourself should keep the key of it. Farewell, and Laertes exits. What is Ophelia he hath said to you? So please you, something touching the Lord Hamlet. Marry, bethought her. It is told me he hath very oft of late given private time to you, and you yourself have of your audience been most free and bounteous, if it be so. So 'tis put on me, and that in way of caution. I must tell you, you do not understand yourself so clearly as it behooves my daughter, and your honour. What is it between you? Give me up the truth. He hath, my lord, of late, made many tenders of his affection to me. Affection? You speak like a green girl, unsifted in such perilous circumstance. Do you believe his tenders, as you call them? I do not know, my lord, what I should think. Marry, I will teach you. Think yourself a baby, that you have taken these tenders for true pay, which are not sterling. Tender yourself more dearly, or not to crack the wind of the poor phrase, running it thus. You'll tender me a fool. My lord, he hath importuned me with love, in honourable fashion. Aye, fashion you may call it. Go to. And hath given countenance to a speech, my lord, with almost all the holy vows of heaven. Aye. Springes to catch woodcocks. I do know, when the blood burns, how prodigal the soul lends the tongue vows. These blazes, daughter, giving more light than heat, extinct in both, even in their promise, as it is a-making, you must not take for fire. From this time be something scanter of your maiden presence. Set your entreatments at a higher rate than a command to parle. For Lord Hamlet believes so much in him that he is young. With a larger tether may he walk than may be given you. In few, Ophelia, do not believe his vows, for they are brokers, not of that dye which their investments show, but mere implorators of unholy suits, breathing like sanctified and pious bawds, the better to beguile. This is for all. I would not, in plain terms, from this time forth have you so slander any moment leisure as to give words or talk with the Lord Hamlet. Look to it. I charge you. Come your ways.
I shall obey, my lord.
Exeunt. Here we get an interesting little dynamic that's kind of like a microcosm to the larger macrocosm of the Hamlet and Gertrude and Claudius dynamic. Notice Hamlet, the son, has a natural mother, Gertrude, and a rather unnatural father in Claudius. And that's one with two parents. And here we have two children with one parent, because, of course, where's Mrs. Polonius, right? And here we have a natural father, but he's kind of an idiot. I mean, he's a court advancer. He likes to find ways to advance his way in court. And most people write him off as just being kind of a fool, or being a meddler, or being a dotty old man. But keep in mind, every character in this work is to some degree connected to this problem of the scholastic nominalism realism. And if, for instance, the other characters, all I would say but Ophelia, I think, maybe Horatio, if all of them are buying into the nominalist thing, even if they don't see it that way, then what is left to them? Pleasure, wealth, power. Pleasure, wealth, and power. Pleasure, wealth, and power are the three distractions from having to think about this issue. But the pleasure, wealth, and power, you could say the flesh, the world, and the devil, right? The world, the flesh, the devil. That those three distractors are also acquiescing to the idea that there's nothing but cold matter. So in other words, in order to avoid the question of whether this is cold matter or spirit-infused reality, in order to avoid that question, most folks often turn to the world, the flesh, the devil. The material stuff, pleasure, or power. And by default, I think human beings, by default, the main position is power. Our default position as humans is trying to have power over other people, power over the world, power over ourselves, control and power. And the second, which is the world, that is the material goods. Material goods is sort of a form of power, because if you got more material goods, you're more powerful, right? And pleasure, which is fleeting, is in a way like power too, because you kind of have power over another person, or you kind of ignite the power in yourself. But those three distractors are also indulged in because you tacitly, that is silently, agree to the idea that this is all there is, that this stuff is all there is, the nominalist position. And that's an interesting thing to think about, isn't it? Because, of course, there are plenty of people who go around saying, oh yeah, there's a God up in heaven. And I love pleasure, or I love material goods, or I love power. Well, do you really think there's a God in heaven? Well, yeah, sure, yeah, there's a God in heaven. Well, if you did, you wouldn't be seeing those three distractors as the only important things, right? You see what I'm saying? So here in Hamlet, every character is going to in some ways be involved, except Ophelia, I think, and Horatio. I think they're the only two characters besides Hamlet who escape this wheel of fortune. By the way, we'll talk about that wheel of fortune idea later on. But world, flesh, and devil, right? Pleasure, stuff, and power. If we are engaging in them, we're engaging in them because we don't want to think about, or we can't think about, or we're incapable of thinking about the fundamental problem, which is to be or not to be. Is there existence or is there nothing? Is there God or is there fake God, false God? Realism or nominalism? And the more that we indulge in those three things, the more we avoid that, and the more we give credence to, tacit agreement to, the idea that there is nothing else besides this. This is it. If this weren't it, I wouldn't try to get all of the M&Ms, right? I wouldn't try to gain as much pleasure as I possibly can. I wouldn't try to have power and dominance over other people and prove that I'm the king of the forest, I'm the grandest tiger in all the jungle. I wouldn't do that if I thought there was another world. And we'll get to that later on in a really great speech, which if you've never heard this before, then here's your cultural enrichment moment in a to be or not to be speech. That's exactly the point. That's exactly what's being talked about. If you believed that there was an afterlife, or that there was another world, or that there was a God, then world and flesh, this world and this flesh and the devil, material goods, pleasure and power, would not concern you at all. You'd be singularly unconcerned about these things. They would fall away. They become so unimportant. They'd be like trivialities. You would find it absurd that people try to dominate other people. It's absurd. Why would you do that? You're worm food waiting to happen. You're fertilizer walking on two legs. Why would you bother dominating another bag of fertilizer? If you believe that there was a God, then you would see that dominance is trivial. It's insignificant. It's foolish. If you believe that there was a metaphysical world, you would say that all of this material stuff around us, I could let it go in a second. It's all so much ash, so much straw, as Thomas Aquinas said. If you believe that there really was an undiscovered country, that there really was a soul, or there really was another world, a metaphysical world, then pleasure itself in this world would not be your goal at all. It would be pleasure simply to be alive every day. But Polonius, who is trying to advance himself in the court, is seeking after power. And Polonius, who is doing this, I think, tacitly agrees to the idea that this is all there is. Seeking power and great prestige in Denmark, right? I've often thought, why does he set it in Denmark? I mean, on the one hand, it could be that he sets it in Denmark because that's where the source material comes from, that Hamlet, the original story of Hamlet is set in Denmark. Well, maybe. But in a way, it's always struck me like Denmark, it was once a great power, that's true. But by the time that Shakespeare's writing, it's not a great power at all. It's kind of like, we're going to set this in the great and powerful city of French Lick, Indiana. Sorry, French Lick, if you're watching, anybody from French Lick, Indiana, sorry. This is going to be Buffalo Honk, New York. We're going to set it, and you're going to gain great power at Buffalo Honk, New York. Big fish in a small pond. That's why great comedy shows like The Office are so funny. If you haven't watched The Office, you're in for a treat. You should watch The Office. It's absolutely fantastic. But part of the humor there is that you have these little tragedies and these little power plays and these little crises that occur at the very powerful and intense paper manufacturing company of Dunder Mifflin. Who cares? It's a similar thing, I think, that Polonius is seeking to gain great power at the court of Denmark? Right. There's a famous line that Thomas More says to Richie Rich. The story of Thomas More, he's put jailed and eventually killed because he will not sign the documents that the oath swearing that Richard's marriage is valid, Henry VIII's marriage is valid, and Richard Rich, who is a up and coming social climber, basically perjures himself in the court to show that Thomas More is a traitor, and he gains control over the District of Wales. And Thomas More, famously, especially in the play by Robert Bolt, there's a moment where Thomas More has realized that Richard Rich has perjured himself, has lied on the stand before God and everybody. And he says to Richard, "A man might lose his soul and gain all the world, Richard. But for Wales, you would lie and lose your soul for, this tiny little place that nobody really cares about." I think it's a similar thing here in this play. That with Hamlet, although Denmark was at one time a great power, it's now just this somewhere nowhere. I mean, what would Shakespeare's audience think of Denmark? Would they see Denmark as a great and powerful rival of England or Spain or France? I don't think they would. And I think that's part of the point, is that Denmark, it's like look upon my works, ye mighty, and despair, Ashurbanipal, whatever it is, the great leader of the ancient world who dominated everybody. And who's heard of Tiglath-Pileser II? Who? What? Never heard of him. And it's a similar thing. I think it's like, the powerful nation of Denmark. Well, there's this little tragedy going on in the powerful nation of Denmark, but certainly gaining power or social climbing in Denmark. Why? Unless you didn't think there was an afterlife. Because if there's no afterlife, then gaining great power in your little town of New Ulm, in your little town of Buffalo Falls, Frostbite Falls, then gaining great power in that little town would be important, right? And Polonius, consequently, is a rather shallow fellow. He gives all these platitudes to Laertes. Laertes is really, I think Laertes is a wonderful character. He lays out for Ophelia, look, be careful. Hamlet can't do what everybody else can do because he is the heir to the throne. He's got obligations. He's not going to be able to marry a third-tier family like ours. He has to marry a first-tier family. Political alliances, social class alliances. He's got to do that. It's part of what is required of him as the heir to the throne. And when he realizes that, he will put you away, Laertes says. And so Ophelia, be very careful. Just don't give your heart away, because you're going to have it broken. Don't give your virginity away, because you'll be broken goods then, and nobody will want to marry you. So be very careful with Hamlet. He may be young and on fire for you now, but when he realizes what he has to do as heir to the throne, he will not have the luxury anymore of going to the beach at night with you. Not that you want to go to the beach in Denmark. I don't know, it's probably freezing cold, but that's beside the point. The point being that Laertes has a lot of good advice. He's really very solid. He seems like a really intense and intuitive young man who is very clear about what could happen and correct. I mean, it's true. In contrast, Polonius comes along and gives him all these little platitudes. Neither a borrower nor a lender be. Look sharp, but don't look too sharp. Give every man your trust, but give no man your heart. It's like, what you got a booklet of these things, Polonius? Would you write them down on your cuff? What's going on? He's very shallow. And then afterwards, when Laertes leaves, and he turns to Ophelia, and he says something similar to what Laertes says, but what he actually says is I know young men. Every young man only wants one thing from a girl, and it's not love. And that's Polonius's response to Hamlet's love for Ophelia. Now, does Hamlet love Ophelia? Does he not love Ophelia? Critics are divided on this. I tend to think he does. I think he does love Ophelia as best he can, but his vision of love is tainted, greatly tainted, primarily because his mother has been treacherous to him, he thinks, and because he sees the world as a weary, flat, stale, and unprofitable garden that goes to seed, And because he wants to kill himself, he's not really at a place where he is capable of charitable love, or of really loving somebody honestly. Because, where's love supposed to tend? It's supposed to tend towards the giving of self to other. And with a man and woman, supposed to tend towards marriage, towards the unity together, towards being one with the other person. And you can't do that when you're wanting to kill yourself, when you're wanting to off yourself. That's not possible anymore. You aren't thinking primarily about real love, true love, charitable love. Doesn't mean you can't be in love. No, it just means that it's a different kind of love. It's not the kind of love that would provide for a great and lasting, happy family. So Ophelia, being in love with Hamlet, because I think she is in a very precarious position, because she's told by both brother and then by father, don't give yourself to Hamlet. But too late. She already has. Now, I think I totally, you see productions of this, and one of my least favorite, and this might be complete sacrilege to some people, one of my least favorite versions of Hamlet is by Kenneth Branagh. And if no other reason, because he actually comes right out and has a scene where Branagh and Kate Winslet, who plays Ophelia, are rolling in the hay. They're together. And I just take away any nuance or any mystery or any guessing from the audience and show them exactly what they're supposed to think, Branagh. Thanks a lot. I think that Shakespeare's vision it's ambiguous. We don't really know whether Ophelia has given herself to Hamlet or not. I think it's highly unlikely she has, because otherwise her father wouldn't be telling her and her brother wouldn't be telling her, and there might be some evidence that she already had done so. I don't think she has. What I do think has happened is that she has already given her heart to him. She loves him. And that would explain a lot more what happens later in the play. She loves him intensely, and she would become his wife, common law wife, or legal wife, if she were able. But she's not able, because father has said no, brother has said no, and Hamlet eventually does say no as well. And then other things happen. But she's in a very precarious situation. Now, does this little family dynamic, this little insight, this little window, does it have any insight into the overarching theme of the play? I think yes, because one could say that Ophelia is in some ways, could be a good solution to Hamlet's problems. I think that Ophelia in some ways represents that happiness that every person wants, every young man wants. I think that Ophelia is in some ways that lost joy and bon vivant that goes out the window when we are thrown out of Eden. Certainly Adam and Eve, the first couple, is the hoped for joy that people strive towards when they get married. And Ophelia can't get married. She's denied that by her father, and told not to by her brother, and then eventually denied by Hamlet. So does she play into this? Yes, she does. Definitely. She plays into this theme of the agony of the nominalist and realist. She plays into the theme of the agony that Hamlet is going through, because it really is an agony. It's a tragedy. Agon, a suffering in Greek. Protagonist, right? The protagonist is the first sufferer, and that's Hamlet. So Hamlet here in this little tragedy, by the way, side note, tragedy, goat song, right? Tragoidos, the little goat singing its song before it gets killed. The tragedy that we're seeing here is of Hamlet's wrestling with this horrible problem of the world being made into an empty prison cell, and his inability to have that happiness that Ophelia offers. And she is part of that tragedy, because she's not able to be happy either. She represents that joy that he's incapable of reaching, because he's wrestling with this issue, right? If the issue were resolved, if it were all nice and pat and perfect, then he'd go off and and be able to marry her. But he can't because it's not resolved. So we end this scene here with, oh, and one more thing. Frequently Polonius's words are taken out of context. And I just want to make sure that I cover that little bit, because he says, right, at one point, if neither a borrower nor a lender be, this is to Laertes, right? Neither a borrower nor a lender be, and this above all to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day. Thou canst not then be false to any man. And a lot of people take that out of context and think, oh, that's great advice, to your own self be true, right? And then, obviously, it follows as the night the day, right? Sequentially, you can't be false to any man. Well, wrong. Wrong. Sorry, Polonius, that's actually wrong. It's a platitude. It's a nice little quotation to hang on your wall with a background of out-of-focus trees, right? But it's not true. Why? Well, to thine own self be true. That means you have to know yourself. How many people do? And even if you did know yourself, how are you true to yourself? How can you be true to yourself? And even if you are true to yourself, is that what you're supposed to be true to? Aren't you supposed to be true, honest to the truth? And if, for instance, you are honest to the truth, does that mean you can't be false to other people? Well, yeah, you can. In fact, sometimes you have to be. In fact, the whole point of the play is that everyone is wearing a mask. The startling little point here, right? Everyone in the play is wearing a mask. Now, what I mean by that is that on the one hand, they're all wearing masks because there's this political intrigue going on and they're all trying to get power over each other. So they're wearing political masks. And they're wearing masks like at the beginning where Claudius comes out and he's like, oh, regal and, oh, everything's great and we love you, Hamlet, and everything's fine and we just got married. They're wearing masks and covering up the problems, right? Mrs. Robinson from The Graduate, everything's just fine on the surface. Plastics, son, plastics. And they're wearing masks because, like Hamlet becomes, he pretends to be insane in order to avoid political ramifications. That's wearing a mask. And Rosencrantz and Guildenstern show up on stage all happy to see Hamlet again when they're really there to betray him, and that's wearing a mask. And Polonius is constantly trying to trap Hamlet, and that's wearing a mask. And everybody's wearing a mask on the play. But not only that, and this is sort of meta texting here, we're reading a play. We're looking at a play. These aren't real people. Hamlet doesn't actually exist on the play, right? I mean, he doesn't exist on the stage. The things that happen on the stage don't really happen. I mean, I hate to reveal this to you, but when a guy dies on the stage, he doesn't actually get shot. He isn't actually stabbed. That'd be a waste of actors, and it'd be very messy to clean up between acts. But, it's all play acting. They're all wearing masks. So the very play on words here is that it follows as the night the day that canst not be false to any man. No, everyone's wearing a mask. They're wearing a political mask within the context of the play. They're wearing masks because they're actors. And what then does that imply when it extends to the outside world? I think Shakespeare is suggesting something really kind of chilling. It gives you chills to think about this. Everybody wears a mask. Let's put aside the possibility that people are duplicitous, that they're lying to you. This sort of like conspiracy theory. That they're all out to get me. Put that aside for a minute. When you go to talk to someone else, are they true to themselves? You say, hey, how are you? And they say, oh, I'm fine, how are you? They don't say, hey, how are you? Well, my bowels hurt and I just got up this morning with a terrible sense that everything was doomed and my corn on my foot is aching again and my father just passed away. And they don't do that. That would be more true, right? Because that's what's really happening in their life. But no, they put on a mask. They say, hey, everything's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. We're good. And so even if they're not lying to you and they're out to get you, which they may be, but even if they aren't, then they're still wearing a mask when they interact with you. And they're wearing a mask when they go on to a video and talk with you. Like now. This is a mask. This isn't really me. You're not seeing me. You're seeing a mask. They're wearing a mask when they put on the tie and they go into work, right? That's a mask. They're putting on a mask when they put on the makeup, right? Before going out on a date or whatever. That's a mask. If you do your hair, it's a mask. You know, if you adopt an attitude, happy or grumpy or whatever, it's a mask. And even if it weren't, even if you were totally honest and told people exactly what you thought and had no friends at all and everybody hated you, right? Because you were just so darn open. You still wear a mask. Why? Because what in here is actually me? How deep do I have to go to find me? How many layers do I have to peel off to get at me? Where is me? Where is you? Where are you? I mean, that's a profound question that Shakespeare's raising here in this little tidbit of misquoted text from Polonius. That follows as the night the day, that thou canst not be false to any man. Wrong. Everyone is false all the time because we don't have a complete openness between the self and the outside world. We always have this filter. We always have this filter. This face we make to meet the faces that we meet, as T.S. Eliot says. Or this face that we keep in a jar by the door, as the Beatles sing about. You know, we all have this face, this mask that we wear when we go out in public. And you know, that doesn't have to be a bad thing necessarily if we accept the fact that we're wearing a mask and just try to make the best mask we can so that we don't come in all covered in, you know, filth and never brushing our teeth and just pissing everybody else, making everybody else angry at us. You know, if we don't do that, if we try instead to look our best and try and be cheerful, and you know, then we're wearing a mask that helps spread joy and spread happiness, but we're still wearing a mask. We just acknowledge it. We're not true. True, right? True. That word, it's fantastic as a little throwaway word here, right? To thine own self be true. Nothe se auton, as the Greeks said, know yourself. True is actually an architectural term. The true line. True meant to draw something or to construct a line that was straight, that connected correctly between one point and the other. And when we talk about truth, like, what is truth, says Pontius Pilate to Christ? What is truth? When we talk about truth, what we're talking about is the connection between our perception and the reality of the thing. Okay, here's how it works. You know, when you and I deal with objects in the world, or even concepts, we don't put the object directly into our head. You know, to shove the pencil right into our head would hurt. Or like in the movie Pi, to put the drill right in our head would hurt. To put even the concept, you know, you don't put love right into your head, right? What you do is you create a facsimile, if you will, a construct in your head in order to deal with the pencil or in order to deal with the world around you. And the closer that facsimile is to the actual thing, the more true it is. That's what we mean when we say truth. Truth is a proximity. It's between the perception and the reality. And the closer the two are together, the more true they are. So, to your own self be true. That would mean that your perception of yourself was accurate. That you really had an honest perception of what you are as a human being and who you were and what you're capable of. And that's what the Greeks meant by nothe se auton, know yourself. But they didn't mean just, you know, well, here's my arm and here's where my leg is. You know. That what they meant was, Know what it means to be human. Know what you're capable of, both greatness and low qualities. Don't fill yourself with illusions about your godliness or your bestialityness. Bestialness. Have an honest vision about what you are as a person. And Polonius echoes this, but he echoes it with a sort of platitude: to thine own self be true. And even given that, to other people, we still have this mask, right? We're still false, so to speak. It follows as the night, the day, thou canst not be false to any man. No, you can. And you can create layers that block you from the world around you and the other people around you. If those layers are stripped away, well, where is the you? It may be we need those layers, those fortresses around our heart, as Sting sang. It may mean that we need those layers just to interact with other people. I mean, how could I interact with you if I didn't have this layer? Or this layer right here. I couldn't. Not under current conditions. Thanks, Governor Walz. But if, for instance, even if we were able to meet face to face, how could I interact with you if I didn't have this stuff to interact with you? How could I interact with you if I didn't have words to be able to pass to you? Those are layers. They're masks. And wherein there is the truth. It's impossible for humans to be fully true because we always have these layers. Now, we can make the layer, the mask, good. We can craft it in a way so that it is corresponding as closely as we can to what we really are. We can make it positive so that we're trying to be honest with the other person. But by the very nature of the beast, we're always wearing a mask. And that is key to the whole scholastic problem, isn't it? Because in the scholastic problem, the realists want to say that the mask corresponds directly to the thing that it's supposed to be interacting with. The concept corresponds directly to the reality, the realists. The nominalists want to say the construct is just that, a construct and nothing more. That there is no correspondence at all. It's just a mask that you choose to make one way or the other. There's no overarching logos that you have to correspond to, or there's no right and wrong. It's just whatever you construct. That's the realist position. That's a lot to pack into a couple misquoted lines by the alleged fool of the play, right? But it does seem to indicate that there is a serious problem, right? Who's there? Who's there behind the mask? Who is this being behind the mask? Who is Hamlet behind the mask? Now, really quick, turn back to the very beginning of the play, okay? Because this is really fascinating. If you turn back to the very beginning of the play, given this little misquoted line from Polonius in Act 1, Scene 3, right? To thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night, the day, thou canst not be false to any man. The idea that there are masks and layers of meaning, and that everyone wears a mask, and that what we're really trying to do is to make the mask correspond to the reality. It's like C.S. Lewis's book, right? Until we have faces. Until we have a face that really corresponds with the reality that it's representing, the us, the who we are, we're always wearing a mask. We're always separated from the rest of the world. Go back to the very beginning of the play. This is amazing. How does a genius like Shakespeare do this? The very beginning of the play, the opening line, Bernardo says, "Who's there?" Who is there? Right? Who's there? Who is there? Who is this? What is man that you should love him, mortal man that you should come to him? What's inside this empty tomb? This whited sepulcher, if you will. What is the me here? Is there any there? That opening question of the play sends ripples throughout the play. It's like the opening lines of any great, tremendous work. In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, well, that sets the tone for the rest of the work, doesn't it? The whole rest of the work is God creates heaven and earth. And he creates heaven and earth. And he creates heaven and earth. The opening of that text, from there all the way to the book of Revelation is being worked out. It like sets the tone for the rest of the thing. Or sing, rage goddess, sing of the wrath of Achilles, murderous, doomed that sent whole men down to the house of death. Right? Rage goddess, sing. Sets the whole tone for the rest of the Iliad. It's about rage, it's about anger, that overpowering mania. Menin, eeda, thea, periadeo, akaleos. Right? Menin, mania, that rage that we have as humans against the very fact that we're alive, the very fact that we have to choose between an ignominious long life and a glorious short life. That whole fact that we have to take ownership of the fact that we are responsible for our brother's death. Rage, goddess, sing. It sets the whole tone for the rest of the work, right? I mean, there are other great works that are like that. What? And listen up. That's Beowulf. It sets the tone for the rest of the work. This work does it too. It's really quite tremendous. Who's there? Well, that's the problem of the whole play. Who is there? Who's there? Oh Lord, who's there? Are you there? God, it's me, Margaret. Which, by the way, I hate that book, but that's a side point. Is there anything out there? Right? Are we just waiting for Godot? Is there anything beyond this world? Who's there out there in the darkness? And it's interesting that the response is, no, answer me. Stand and unfold yourself. Stand and unfold. Give account for who you are. And then I'll tell you who I am. In the book of Job, and Job has suffered all these things at the hands of the devil, right? But the hands of God, because God says, hey, devil, go and smash Job over the head. And Job has suffered all these things, right? And he's finally given an audience with the Lord, and Job says, you did this to me, and you did this to me, and you did this to me. Give account for yourself. And God says, who are you? Where were you when I set down the pillars of the earth? Where were you when I put the stars in the sky? Where were you when I separated the waters from the waters? What do you think you are? Who are you that you would contest with me? Give account for yourself. You stand and deliver. And it's almost like Shakespeare is taking that what would you call that? That dialogue between God and Job, and he's embodying it in the play. The great question, the big question, is there anybody out there? And the response is, you tell me first, buddy. You want to know who I am? You want to know if there's a God? Find out if there's a you first. And then we'll talk. I just love that. It's like, thanks, Shakespeare, for blowing the top of my head off. I really love that. And all that, this is a little throwaway line from Polonius, is this idiot, right? But Polonius doesn't, like a lot of characters in literature, he doesn't realize the impact of what he says. And he says this tremendous thing after a long list of platitudes, right? It's like one more platitude from his book of platitudes. Hey, Laertes, let me tell you. That platitude then is like the embodiment of the entire problem of the play. Can you, if you're true to yourself, can you be false to other people? And the answer that Hamlet is wrestling with is, well, yeah, you can, because you neither know yourself nor know what you're dealing with. Kind of in a soup that way, or a stew that way. And poor Ophelia, as we shall see, poor Ophelia. Yeah, my first crush there in the Hamlet by Zeffirelli. And when she goes mad, I still get all verklempt. Well, not to give things away, but I get all verklempt. Because, of course, she's suffering under this problem, too, that she can't get married, to the man she loves. And the man she loves is tortured, and she can't help him. In fact, as we'll see very soon, it's not just that she can't help him, she gets used as a pawn to further drive him down a hole. And Hamlet's problem is, can he get out of that hole? Can he find that proper stair upwards, as Virgil points out? And I'll say one last thing here, and then I have to go. But if the opening of the play is "Who's there?", I like the idea that it may be an echo of an Easter greeting, quem quaeritis, an Easter, probably an introit, I think. I have to check, but one of the major songs that's sung in the Easter festive season is quem quaeritis. That's whom do you seek? That's what Christ says when the soldiers come to get him in the garden. Whom do you seek? But it's also what the angels and then Christ, the resurrected Christ, say to Mary Magdalena when she comes to the tomb, the empty tomb with nobody in it. And the angels say, whom do you seek? Why do you seek the living among the dead? Whom do you seek? And why that has a double significance. On the one hand, it has significance because the Quem Quaeritis was the first drama performed in the Western medieval world. That it's one of those liturgical plays that was performed at the Easter season in the church. So the people that didn't read were able to get the stories of the Bible, the stories of the resurrection, and it's a depiction of Mary Magdalena coming to the tomb and the angel saying, "Whom do you seek?" So the opening lines are the Quem Quaeritis. So the rest of the little liturgical drama is named the Quem Quaeritis. And that little play, as I say as little, it's really quite magnificent to hear. And if you want a good version of it, I can post that for you. It's quite lovely to hear. But that play is attributed as being, or accredited as being, the source of all Western drama after the medieval era. The Greeks and the Romans had their drama, but then they went, they fell, Rome fell, it crashed, and drama was not a thing for many, many years. Quem Quaeritis was one of those plays that Western drama was based upon, and that Shakespearean drama owes its roots to. And so it's kind of giving a tip of the hat to that origin, the granddaddy of all drama, Quem Quaeritis. But it's also important because if it does have a connection to the Quem Quaeritis, and I really do think that's quite an interesting, whether it's valid, I think it is, but whether it's valid is to be proven by scholars greater than myself. But it's a very interesting connection if it's true, because the whole play is about getting out of the hole, getting out of the tomb, getting out of that dark little prison cell of Denmark. And the word for that is resurrection. And what time of the year in the Christian church is resurrection celebrated? At Easter. And what is the liturgical drama at Easter during the medieval era? The Quem Quaeritis. Who's there? Well, anyway. If there is someone there and they're listening, if you're listening now, tune in your radio. If you're listening now, we'll pick this up as soon as, again, Act 1, Scene 4, as soon as we get the chance to, because I do enjoy these very much. And I hope you enjoy them too. And if you do enjoy them, stay with me. We'll get through all of this magnificent play. And if you also enjoy what I'm doing here, do visit my Patreon site and help me out a little bit. I'd certainly appreciate it. Until we meet again, stay safe, stay healthy. God bless you all.